At a family dinner in Seattle, my sister's hand cracked across my face, her voice cutting the room in half. Get out of my house, I stumbled into the yard, bruised and silent, while Mom and Dad just sat at the table, cold, unmoving. They didn't lift a finger. A week later, a package landed on their doorstep. By nightfall, my phone lit up with 45 missed calls. My mother's frantic message, it was all a mistake. My reply was 3 words, get out now. My name is Melissa Thompson and I'm 32 years old. If you asked anyone in my family to describe me, they'd probably say I'm fine. Not amazing, not failing, just fine. That word has followed me like a shadow since childhood. Melissa's fine. Melissa doesn't need help. Melissa will figure it out. What they really meant was that I didn't deserve the same attention, money, or protection they lavished on my sister Amanda. The only people who ever truly saw me were my grandparents, Dorothy and Harold Wilson. Their small blue house in North Seattle was my refuge growing up. It smelled like tomato vines from Grandma's garden and sawdust from Grandpa's workshop. In their world, I wasn't invisible. I was the kid who loved computers, who asked endless questions, who stayed up past midnight tinkering with code on their outdated desktop. Grandma sat beside me, patient and steady, teaching me how to debug a stubborn error. Grandpa slipped me his old circuit board saying, "Fix what's broken, Melissa. Start with the wires, then move on to the world." Meanwhile, at home with my parents, I was the afterthought. Patricia and Robert Thompson never missed a chance to invest in Amanda's dreams. At 15, I asked for a laptop to join a summer coding camp. Patricia sighed, saying, "We're tight on money right now." The next week, Amanda unwrapped a brand new MacBook for her startup ideas. I worked weekends at a cafe to buy a used Dell with a sticky keyboard. At 16, Amanda got a shiny SUV with a ribbon on top for her birthday. I got a bus pass. Robert beamed, calling Amanda a risk taker while brushing off my straight-A report card with the same line he always used, "You're doing fine, Melissa." That word again, sharp as glass. By 18, the biggest betrayal landed. I discovered my college fund had disappeared into Amanda's first startup venture, an app that collapsed in less than 4 months. Patricia shrugged, saying, "Unexpected expenses came up. You'll manage." So I did. I worked 30 hours a week through college coding freelance projects just to keep tuition paid. I graduated with honors while Amanda dropped out of 2 universities, each time cushioned by another check from Mom and Dad. When the world felt unbearable, I called Grandma Dorothy. She'd pour tea and tell me softly, "They're blind to your worth, but you are stronger than their mistakes." Grandpa's advice was gruffer, but no less steady. "Stand tall, kid. Don't let their noise drown you out." Their faith carried me, and when they passed 3 years ago, their will carried something more, their house. Dorothy's letter still sits in my desk drawer. "Melissa, you gave us love when others only took. This house is yours to protect." Amanda rolled her eyes at the reading, tossing her hair. "Good luck with that fixer-upper," she scoffed. But I did more than fix it up. I poured my savings into renovations, installing a smart home system. I coded myself rewiring the garden lights to shine on Dorothy's roses. Every nail I hammered, every bug I fixed, felt like a conversation with them. Amanda, meanwhile, treated the house like a backup plan. When her fitness app failed, she started crashing in the guest room. My parents acted as though this was normal, visiting, often talking about our family home, as if the will hadn't named me sole heir. Patricia once said, "Amanda just needs a place to get back on her feet. You're doing fine." The years blurred into one long pattern of favoritism. At holiday dinners, Amanda's big dreams filled the air, while my achievements, work promotions, new projects were brushed aside. They whispered about stability for Amanda, about how the house might be better for her future. I swallowed the sting and stayed quiet, clinging to Grandma's words. "Protect this house like you protect yourself." Still, part of me longed for reconciliation. That's why last month I invited them all to dinner at my Seattle apartment. I wanted to prove I could host a meal, cook something from Grandma's recipe box, and maybe, just maybe, heal the rift. I spent hours layering lasagna, the smell of garlic and tomatoes thick in the air, filling my tiny apartment with warmth. I set the table with mismatched plates and my grandmother's old silverware, polishing each fork like it mattered. I told myself this dinner might be the first step to peace. They arrived late, of course. Amanda breezed in first, her eyes sweeping the room with that familiar sneer, as if my modest place were beneath her. Patricia followed with a plastic bakery box of cookies, muttering about traffic. Robert barely nodded already, asking for a beer. The conversation started safe, book club, gossip, neighborhood chatter. I mentioned a budgeting app I was developing at work, hoping for encouragement. Patricia waved me off with a perfunctory smile. "That's nice, Melissa. But let's hear about Amanda's new venture." Amanda launched into a dramatic retelling of her latest failure, her fitness app that no investors wanted. "They just don't get my vision," she sighed, tossing her hair. Robert nodded like a loyal fan. "You'll find the right one, sweetheart." I bit my tongue, used to the script. But then Patricia turned the conversation sharp. "So, Melissa, have you updated the kitchen at the Wilson house?" Yet she asked, her voice too casual. Amanda leaned in. "That house would be perfect for me. You don't need all that space." The fork froze in my hand. "It's my house," I said evenly. Amanda's eyes narrowed. "You don't deserve it. I'm starting over. It's better with me." Robert's voice rumbled. "It's a family house. Think about sharing." Patricia added Amanda's in a tough spot. "You're fine." Something in me cracked. "I've worked for everything," while you handed Amanda everything I said, my voice shaking but steady. The silence was heavy. Then Amanda stood her chair, scraping. "Don't act superior just because you code apps nobody uses." Before I could react, her hand whipped across my cheek. Hot, stinging, humiliating. She grabbed my arm and shoved me toward the door. "Get out of my house," she snarled as if my apartment belonged to her. I stumbled into the yard, tasting blood, while my parents just sat there, their faces stone. The night air was damp and cold. I stood under the flickering streetlight, bruised and breathless, realizing I had been erased from my own life for the last time. Silence has a way of sticking to you. After Amanda shoved me out of my own apartment, the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. I went to work, answered emails, checked off tickets, but inside I felt like a radio left on static. Even in the hum of my open office, I heard only her words. "Get out of my house." My own walls, my own food, my own life erased by a sentence. I stopped calling my parents. They didn't reach out either. My cheek healed in a few days, but the bruise on my arm lingered, yellow, then green, then gone. Only the memory stayed replaying when I brushed my teeth at night or passed a mirror in the morning. Each time the sting rose again. One night, I sat at my desk with the deed to the Wilson house glowing on my laptop screen. Grandma Dorothy's words from her letter whispered in my mind, "Protect this house the way you protect yourself." I hadn't protected myself that night. I'd walked away in silence, but maybe I could still protect the house. I opened the county assessor's website and typed in the property address. When I inherited it 3 years ago, the house had been valued at around $200,000. Now the estimate blinked back at me, nearly $1 million. My stomach tightened. The tech boom had transformed our neighborhood into a gold rush. My grandparents' garden porch and creaky wood floors weren't just sentimental, they were worth more than anything I had ever owned. And my sister wanted it. My parents wanted it. They hadn't said it outright, but every dismissive shrug, every think about sharing, was their way of telling me to surrender. I dialed Rebecca Hayes, my closest friend at work. She answered on the second ring. "Melissa, it's late." "You okay?" I told her everything. The slap, the shove, the locked door, the house, the will, the valuation. My voice shook as I described how my parents just sat there watching. Rebecca's voice sharpened. "Melissa, you can't let them take this. They're counting on you to roll over. You need backup. Get a lawyer." She gave me the name of a property attorney she trusted, Karen Walsh. I wrote it down my pen, digging so hard into the paper, the tip broke. The next morning, I called Karen. Her voice was brisk, confident. "Send me the will and deed. Washington law is clear on inheritance. If it's yours, it's yours. Let's see what we're working with." By noon, I had emailed her scanned copies. My hands trembled, but not from fear. This time, it was purpose. When she called back that afternoon, I held my breath. Good news, she said. The will is airtight, signed with 3 witnesses plus a doctor's note confirming your grandparents' mental clarity. That's strong, very strong. I exhaled dizzy with relief. Karen's tone shifted slightly. Melissa, if your family has been living there without your permission, that's trespassing, legally squatting. You can issue a 72-hour eviction notice or proceed with a sale. Entirely your choice. Squatting. The word lodged in my chest. Amanda wasn't just borrowing space. My parents weren't just helping her out. They were occupying something that wasn't theirs. I dug deeper into my email. Old messages from Patricia surfaced, asking about the wiring about Amanda's internet needs. A text from Robert praising the garage as perfect for Amanda's equipment. The puzzle pieces arranged themselves. They had been planning this for months, confident I'd do nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories from childhood swirled like smoke. The time Patricia canceled my science fair trip to pay for Amanda's coding boot camp. The weekend, Robert praised Amanda's entrepreneurial spirit while brushing off my scholarship letter. Every time I was told I'd be fine, Amanda was being lifted. Every time I was overlooked, she was spotlighted. I remembered sitting on Grandma's porch at 17, sobbing after Patricia told me my tuition money was gone. Grandpa handed me a soldering iron. Fix what's broken, Melissa. Starting with yourself. Maybe this was what he meant. Rebecca met me for coffee the next day near Pike Place Market. The air smelled of fish and salt from the waterfront, the sidewalks slick with drizzle. This is your moment, she said, stirring her latte. They've taken enough your college fund, your peace, your dignity. Don't let them take the house. I nodded, feeling something harden inside me. I won't. Back in my apartment, I spread out the documents across the table, the will, the deed, the market analysis. It wasn't just paper, it was proof that I wasn't powerless. Karen recommended selling quickly to a reliable buyer. Cut ties, Melissa. Get your equity out. Don't let them drag this on. I considered it. Selling felt like betrayal of my grandparents of their gift. But maybe holding on while Amanda lived there like it was hers was the bigger betrayal. I researched buyers late into the night. A young couple, the Carters, caught my eye. 2 kids, stable jobs, financing pre-approved. Their letter said they loved the garden and the porch swing, that they dreamed of raising their children there. They reminded me of what Grandma and Grandpa had built the house for family stability roots. I signed the contract with them the following week. I didn't tell my family. Not yet. Instead, I returned to the house one last time, parking down the street so Amanda wouldn't see me. The roses in the garden had wilted their petals, browned from neglect. The porch light flickered one of the bulbs out. Inside, Amanda's things were everywhere, weights stacked in the living room, smoothie blenders on the counter, half-empty protein tubs on the table where Grandma used to serve tea. My throat tightened. They had erased my grandparents' touch. I went to the pantry where I had installed a small safe years ago. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside, I found Grandpa's old pocket watch and a manila envelope sealed with red wax. I broke the seal. Inside was a notarized addendum I had never seen in Grandpa's shaky handwriting. If Melissa is ever harassed, coerced, or harmed by family members regarding this property, she has sole authority to transfer or sell immediately. Behind the paper was a small USB drive labeled House Cam Backups. I slid them into my bag, my heart pounding. My grandparents had prepared for this. They knew. Back at my apartment, I scanned the addendum and sent it to Karen. Her reply was swift. This changes everything. They have no case, not even a weak one. That night, I sat at my desk with Grandma's letter beside me and the sale contract ready. For once, the silence wasn't suffocating. It was steady. Rebecca called. You ready to send the package? Yes, I whispered. The next morning, I mailed it certified copies of the will, the addendum, the signed sale contract, and a 72-hour eviction notice. The storm arrived faster than I expected. Patricia called first, her voice high and shaky. Melissa, what is this? You're selling the house. That's a mistake. We need to talk. Amanda followed with a venomous voicemail. You can't do this. It's not just your house. It's ours. Robert left one line. "We need to talk. Now." I ignored them all. Rebecca texted package delivered. "Brace yourself." By evening, my voicemail held more than a dozen messages. My phone screen showed 45 missed calls. Mom's voice cracked through one. "Melissa, it was all a mistake. Please stop this." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. Then I typed 3 words. "Get out now." The package had detonated like a bomb. By the next morning, my phone was a graveyard of voicemails, 45 missed calls, half from my mother, the rest split between Amanda's rants and Dad's flat, unreadable tone. I didn't answer. I went to work, pushed code, drank bitter coffee. But every vibration in my pocket was another reminder that my family was unraveling. At lunch, Karen called. Her voice was cool, steady. "Melissa, their lawyer, reached out Paul Grayson. He's claiming the house is a family asset." I laughed, sharp and humorless. "Let him read the will. I sent it to him," she said, "along with your grandparents' addendum. He knows they're out of moves." "Melissa." "He also asked whether you really have security footage." My throat tightened. I opened my laptop that night and plugged in the USB Grandpa had left me. Folders lined the screen, time-stamped clips, backups of every smart camera I'd installed. I scrolled until my stomach dropped the night of the dinner was there. I clicked play. The video showed my tiny dining room lit by the overhead lamp. Steam rose from the lasagna. My face was tense, my fork frozen mid-air. Then Amanda's hand whipped across my cheek, the sound cracking like a gunshot. I stumbled, caught the frame of the door, and fell out of sight. In the background, my parents didn't move. Mom's eyes followed me for a second, then dropped back to her plate. Dad's shoulders never shifted. I pressed pause, my own reflection trembling in the laptop screen. Seeing it from the outside made it worse, the violence, the silence, the betrayal captured in pixels. Karen's voice echoed in my head. "If they push, this becomes evidence." 2 days later, the 72-hour eviction notice expired. My phone buzzed with one final message from Amanda. "You'll regret this." I didn't reply. That afternoon, Rebecca drove with me to the Wilson house. We parked across the street, the rain tapping faintly on the windshield. At exactly 4 p.m., the front door opened. Amanda stormed out first, dragging 2 overstuffed suitcases, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her jaw tight. She hurled the luggage into the trunk of her car with enough force to rattle the bumper. Patricia followed, carrying a banker's box of framed photos. One picture slipped and cracked across the glass, a family portrait, the fracture splitting us clean down the middle. She held it against her chest like it still meant something whole. Robert was last. He closed the door, carefully checked the lock, and stood there for a long moment with his hand on the knob. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Then he turned, expression blank, and walked to the car without a word. They didn't look at me. They didn't yell across the street. But as Amanda slammed the driver's door and caught sight of me through the rain-speckled glass, her eyes locked onto mine, burning, desperate, afraid. For a heartbeat, she looked like a child about to be left behind. Then the engine roared, the tires spat water, and the car disappeared down the block. Rebecca let out a long breath beside me. "It's over," she whispered. I wasn't sure yet. We walked to the house, my keys cold in my hand. The roses out front sagged from neglect, their petals browned at the edges. I unlocked the door. The air inside smelled stale sweet with Amanda's abandoned protein powder and sharp with lemon cleaner Patricia had always overused. The silence was enormous. I moved through the rooms slowly. Amanda's workout equipment littered the living room. The kitchen counter was sticky, half a blender, still crusted with smoothie. In the hallway, one of my grandparents' photo frames had been turned face down as if even the images couldn't watch what had happened here. Finally, I reached the dining room. The chairs were still slightly askew from the night of the dinner. My own seat sat pulled back, angled toward the door where Amanda had shoved me. I touched the back of the chair. The wood was smooth, worn by decades of use, steady beneath my hand. I thought of the video clip, the slap, the silence, the frozen faces of my parents. Proof that this wasn't just in my head. Proof that I hadn't exaggerated. proof that their betrayal was as real as the bruise that had bloomed across my arm. Rebecca's voice broke the quiet. "Melissa, you okay?" I nodded, though tears blurred my vision. "I'm not broken," I said softly. "Not anymore." We stood there a moment longer, listening to the creak of the old house settling into its emptiness. Outside, the rain slowed the gray light softening. For the first time in years, I felt like the house was mine again, not because of a document or a court or even the eviction, but because I had finally stood up and refused to give it away. The battle wasn't over. There would be fallout threats, accusations. But as I locked the door behind me, the keys heavy in my pocket, I knew the hardest part was done. They had shown me who they were, and I had finally decided who I would be. The day after Amanda and my parents drove away from the Wilson house, Karen called me into her office. Her desk was a neat square of files, a fern angled toward the window, and a cup of coffee steaming like it had no idea of the wars being fought in that room. "They're done," she said simply. Grayson admitted they can't contest the will. The 3-year statute of limitations is gone. The addendum seals the door, and that video clip, well, we won't need it, but it shuts every argument down. I let out a laugh that came out closer to a sob. "So, it's really over," Karen nodded. "Legally, yes. Emotionally, that's on you. But the house is yours to sell, and the Carters are ready to close. The sheriff is already scheduled in case your family resists, but I doubt it'll come to that." The word sheriff made my stomach twist, but also gave me a strange comfort. For once, the law was behind me. For once, I wasn't the kid told to stay quiet while Amanda got the spotlight. The sale closed in less than 3 weeks. The Carters brought their kids to the final walk through 2 little ones in rain boots, who immediately ran to the back garden. Their laughter floated through the air as they discovered the porch swing, squealing when it groaned under their weight. My chest ached, but in a good way. This was what Grandma and Grandpa wanted: their house filled with family and joy, not entitlement and demands. I handed the Carters the keys, and when Mrs. Carter hugged me, her eyes shining, I realized the house wasn't slipping away, it was being reborn. Karen filed the eviction paperwork formally, even though my family had already left. "CYA," she explained. "Cover your assets." I smiled at the pun, feeling lighter than I had in years. The fallout came quickly. Amanda's fitness app collapsed within weeks. Investors who had once humored her pulled out entirely when they realized she no longer had a stable address. Her social media turned into a desperate carousel rants one day, teary pleas the next, then silence. I later heard she was evicted from her shared office space and had her leased SUV repossessed. Last anyone mentioned, she was working part-time at a coffee shop, her followers dwindling like sand through her fingers. Patricia and Robert didn't fare better. 2 years earlier, they'd refinanced their suburban home to cover Amanda's debts. With no bailout from me and no equity left in the Wilson house, the math didn't work. Within months, their home was foreclosed. The local paper even ran a small story on suburban bankruptcies, their names printed in black and white for the whole neighborhood to see. Patricia's book club stopped inviting her. Robert's golf buddies found new partners. Their carefully maintained social world shrank into silence. They moved into a cramped rental downtown, a far cry from the life they used to boast about at holiday dinners. I didn't gloat, but I didn't grieve either. For decades, they had invested in Amanda at my expense. They had taken my tuition money, dismissed my achievements, demanded I sacrifice for her dreams. Now their choices had caught up with them. Actions have consequences. Grandpa's voice echoed in my memory, steady as ever. Rebecca and I celebrated quietly. At a small diner near Lake Union, she clinked her coffee mug against mine. "You flipped the script," she said, smiling wide. "They thought they could corner you forever. But you walked out the front door with your head high." I smiled back, though a part of me still carried the weight of what had been lost. Not the house I'd chosen to let that go. What I lost was the illusion that my parents would ever be my safety net. That fantasy had been burned away the night they watched Amanda slap me and did nothing. With the $850,000 from the sale, I bought a modest bungalow in a quieter neighborhood. The house was half the size of my grandparents', but perfect for me. I painted the walls a calm gray, hung Dorothy and Harold's photo in the hallway, and planted rose cuttings in the backyard. The first time I saw a new bloom open its petals catching the morning light, I cried into my coffee. It wasn't grief, it was relief. The rest of the money I invested into a project that mattered to me, an education app for kids. Not a flashy startup with empty promises, but something real. Rebecca became my co-founder. We spent late nights at her dining table, laptops, open coffee cups multiplying. We argued about button colors, laughed over code errors, and kept building. When we launched, the downloads trickled in at first, then grew. Teachers wrote us saying their students loved the interactive lessons. Parents sent videos of kids proudly showing off their first coded animations. Every message felt like a thread sewing me back together. Meanwhile, my parents continued to call. Patricia left voicemails laced with guilt. "We can fix this, Melissa. Families fight, but they forgive." Robert's tone was colder. "You've gone too far. This is permanent." Amanda left a single voicemail, her voice breaking. "You ruined me. Where am I supposed to go? I saved none of them." Instead, I focused on the life I was building. The roses growing strong, the app gaining traction, the friends who showed up without conditions. My grandparents' words guided me through the hard days. Grandma's protect this house the way you protect yourself. Grandpa's fix what's broken, starting with yourself. I had done both. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the fine daughter. I was simply myself, whole, steady, and free. 2 months after the sale closed, I woke up in my new bungalow to the sound of rain on the roof. The house was smaller than the Wilson place, but the quiet inside felt vast. Morning light painted gold stripes across the living room, catching on the framed photo of Dorothy and Harold I'd hung above my desk. Their smiles reminded me that home was never just wood and nails, it was the love that lived inside. Out back, the rose cuttings I'd transplanted were blooming. Their petals were thinner than the originals, but just as stubborn. Every time I saw them push through the soil, I felt like my grandparents were nodding from somewhere I couldn't see. The first bloom opened on a Tuesday, right before I logged into a video call with Rebecca to review our education app's latest update. Seeing those petals, then watching a classroom of 5th graders in Spokane celebrate their first successful code animation, it was like my two worlds had finally stitched together. I hadn't spoken to Amanda or my parents since the eviction. That silence used to feel like a wound. Now it felt like a boundary line, a line that kept me safe, a line I chose. Patricia sent one last text, "We should talk." I blocked her number. Amanda's final voicemail accusing me of betrayal went to the trash folder without a second thought. Robert never called again, and yet the emptiness they left wasn't crushing. It was space. Space to breathe, to build, to remember who I was without their constant chorus of, "You're fine." At night, I sometimes drove past the old house. The Carters had settled in beautifully, kids' bikes leaned against the fence chalk drawings, sprawled across the sidewalk lights, glowing warm behind the curtains. A small sign by the gate read Dorothy's Garden. I didn't stop the car. I didn't need to. Just knowing the roses were blooming under new laughter was enough. Grandma's letter sits framed on my desk. "Now, Melissa, you gave us love when others only took. Protect this house the way you protect yourself." For a long time, I thought she meant the property. But now I understand she meant me. I am the house. I am the one worth protecting. If you've ever had to cut ties with family to protect yourself, I see you. It hurts. But it can also heal. Tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it for you? Right now, I'd love to know how far this story travels. And if you've walked through your own storm of betrayal, share it in the comments. You're not alone. Stay with me here for more stories about finding courage, setting boundaries, and finally choosing yourself.